The morning sun painted golden streaks across the cracked sidewalk of downtown Portland where 12-year-old Oliver Chen sat on a bench clutching a wrinkled $20 bill in his small hands. His eyes were red from crying, and his birthday had started in the worst possible way. Just 2 hours earlier, his mother had handed him that money with trembling fingers, apologizing, because it was all she could afford this year. She worked double shifts at the diner, and still they barely made rent each month. Oliver had seen the shame in her eyes when she gave him that single bill instead of the skateboard he had been hoping for. He told her it was perfect and hugged her tight because he knew she was doing her best. But now, sitting alone on that bench while his mom worked her morning shift, Oliver felt the weight of disappointment pressing against his chest. He looked down at the $20 and thought about what he could buy. Maybe some new headphones from the thrift store or enough art supplies to last him a few months. Drawing was his escape from their tiny apartment and the constant worry about money. But as he sat there lost in thought, a sound drifted through the morning air that made him forget everything else. Someone was playing violin nearby, and the music was unlike anything Oliver had ever heard. It was not just notes strung together, but a living, breathing voice that seemed to understand sadness and hope at the same time. The melody wrapped around him like a warm blanket on a cold night. He stood up slowly and followed the sound around the corner to where a small crowd had gathered. There, in front of an old brick building, stood a man who looked like he had seen better days. His clothes were worn and faded. His shoes had holes in them. A threadbare coat hung loosely on his thin frame, and his hair was long and unkempt beneath a baseball cap. But when Oliver looked at his face, he saw something unexpected. The man's eyes were closed, and his expression held such pure joy and peace that it transformed him completely. In his hands he held a violin that looked as weathered as its owner, and from it poured music that seemed to reach into Oliver's soul and touch something deep inside. Oliver moved closer and watched the man's fingers dance across the strings. The crowd around him was small, just a few people pausing on their way to work. Some dropped coins into the open violin case at the man's feet, but most hurried past, barely glancing at the street performer. Oliver noticed how the man did not seem to care whether anyone stopped or not. He played for himself, for the music, for something bigger than money or recognition. The song built to a crescendo that made Oliver's heart race, and then softened into something so tender and beautiful that tears began sliding down his cheeks. He thought about his mother working so hard just to give him that $20. He thought about all the people in the world who struggled and fought and kept going anyway. The music seemed to be telling their story, and suddenly Oliver understood something important. His birthday money was not just paper. It represented his mother's sacrifice, her love, her hope for him. And maybe the most meaningful way to honor that gift was not to spend it on himself. When the song ended, the small crowd applauded briefly and dispersed. Oliver walked up to the musician, who opened his eyes and smiled gently. Up close, Oliver could see the lines etched deep in the man's face and the calluses on his fingers from years of playing. There was a kindness in his gaze that made Oliver feel safe. Oliver held out the $20 bill with both hands. The musician looked surprised and shook his head. He had a warm voice that carried a hint of something Oliver could not quite place. He said that was too much and Oliver should keep his money. But Oliver insisted. He explained that today was his birthday and this was his birthday money. He told the musician that his playing was the most beautiful thing he had ever heard, and it made him feel less alone. He said he wanted the musician to have it because the music was worth so much more than $20. The musician's eyes grew bright with moisture. He knelt down so he was at Oliver's level and asked if he was sure. Oliver nodded firmly. The musician accepted the money with both hands as if it were something precious. He thanked Oliver and told him he had an extraordinary heart. Then he did something unexpected. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card that was bent and faded. He pressed it into Oliver's hand and told him to hold on to it. He said that kindness always comes back around in ways we never expect. Oliver looked at the card, but the name printed on it meant nothing to him. He tucked it carefully into his pocket and thanked the musician. As he turned to leave, the man called after him. He said Oliver reminded him why he played music in the first place. Not for fame or fortune, but to connect with people's hearts. Oliver waved goodbye and walked back toward home, feeling lighter than he had all morning. His birthday money was gone, but somehow he felt richer. 3 days later, Oliver came home from school to find his mother sitting at their small kitchen table looking stunned. In her hands was their house phone and her face was pale. She asked Oliver if he had met a street musician downtown on his birthday. Confused Oliver said yes and asked what was wrong. His mother's voice shook as she explained that a man had called their apartment. He had tracked down their number through the school district because he remembered Oliver mentioning where he went to school. The man wanted to talk to Oliver. Oliver's stomach twisted with worry as his mother handed him the phone. The warm, familiar voice on the other end belonged to the street musician, but now he introduced himself properly. His name was Vincent Torres, and he was not just a street performer. He was a Grammy-winning violinist who had lost everything 5 years ago to addiction and pride. He had been at the top of the classical music world, performing in concert halls around the globe. Then his life collapsed. He lost his marriage, his home, his career, his reputation. For years, he lived on the streets, trapped in darkness. 6 months ago, he finally got clean and started rebuilding his life one day at a time. Playing on street corners was his way of reconnecting with music without the pressure and pretense of his old life. Vincent told Oliver that his $20 gift and his words had affected him more deeply than Oliver could imagine. For the first time in years, Vincent felt truly seen, not as a former celebrity or a homeless man, but as a human being sharing something beautiful with another human being. Oliver's generosity reminded him that music was about giving, not taking. It gave him the courage to reach out to his old manager and ask for help getting back on his feet professionally. Vincent's voice grew thick with emotion as he continued. He had been offered a small concert at a local venue in 2 weeks. It would be his first real performance since his fall from grace. He wanted Oliver and his mother to be his honored guests. But there was more. Vincent had connections throughout the music world, and he knew people at the Portland Youth Orchestra. He had arranged for Oliver to receive a full scholarship for private violin lessons if he was interested. Vincent said he had seen something in Oliver's eyes that day on the street, a sensitivity to beauty and emotion that could not be taught. If Oliver wanted to learn, Vincent would make sure he had that opportunity. Oliver could barely breathe. He had always loved music but never dreamed he could actually play an instrument. Lessons were expensive, far beyond what his family could afford. He stammered out a yes and heard Vincent laugh with pure joy on the other end of the line. Vincent said he would handle all the arrangements and would be in touch soon. Before hanging up, he told Oliver something that would stay with him forever. He said that the $20 Oliver gave him was not charity. It was an investment in hope, and it had already paid back more than either of them could measure. 2 weeks later, Oliver sat in a small concert hall next to his mother, wearing clothes they had carefully selected from the thrift store. The room was packed with people from the music community who had come to witness Vincent Torres's return. When the lights dimmed and Vincent walked onto the stage, Oliver barely recognized him. Clean-shaven and dressed in simple, elegant concert attire, Vincent looked like a different person. But when he raised his violin to his shoulder and began to play, Oliver heard the same soul, the same truth, the same beauty that had stopped him on that street corner. The performance was breathtaking. Vincent poured everything into his music. His pain, his redemption, his gratitude, his hope. When he finished, the entire audience rose to their feet in thunderous applause. Tears streamed down faces throughout the room. Vincent bowed deeply, and then he looked directly at Oliver. He spoke into the microphone and told the entire audience about a 12-year-old boy who gave his birthday money to a stranger on the street. He said that act of pure kindness had saved him in ways that no amount of fame or success ever could. He called Oliver his inspiration and his teacher. Oliver's face burned red as people turned to look at him, but his mother squeezed his hand, and he felt her pride radiating like sunlight. After the concert, Vincent introduced Oliver to musicians and teachers who welcomed him warmly. Within months, Oliver was learning violin and discovering a talent he never knew he possessed. Vincent became his mentor and friend, checking in regularly and encouraging him every step of the way. Years would pass and Oliver would grow into a fine young musician himself. But he would never forget the lesson he learned on his 12th birthday. Real wealth is not measured in money or possessions. It lives in the moments when we choose to give from the heart, especially when we have little to give. That $20 bill bought something far more valuable than anything in a store. It bought connection, hope, and a future neither Oliver nor Vincent could have imagined. Kindness is never wasted. It ripples outward, touching lives in ways we may never see. And sometimes, if we are very lucky, we get to witness the miracle that happens when one small act of generosity changes everything. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Pure Kindness Stories. Share this message with someone who needs to remember that their small acts of compassion matter more than they know. Together we can create a world where kindness is not the exception but the rule. Thank you for being here and for believing in the power of human goodness.